Hey guys, it's Alex and Dad from 7th Hour Films, back again with Doctor Who Classic. Last time on Doctor Who Classic, we had Vengeance on Varos. Dad, what happened last time?
I don't know, there was some green version of SpongeBob SquarePants and a whole bunch of other stuff that... certainly better than the one that we saw with Peter Davison, but...
Yeah, it was just sort of a run-of-the-mill, fun Doctor Who episode.
Yeah.
And we were introduced to the 6th Doctor, played by Colin Baker. He was alright. I liked him. He did stuff, unlike Peter Davison.
Yeah. I still think they were way more bland than the originals. You know, Pertwee and Baker and... who's the second one? Troughton and even William Hartnell just were so much quirkier. And now we're getting into, you know, the vanilla pudding doctors, and it's just kind of bland.
I suppose. I think Colin Baker was a little bit better because a lot of people said, like, his doctor has a lot of mood swings. And that was shown, like, on the TARDIS when it's like he was just completely like, well, we're just going to stay here and die then, or at least I'm going to keep regenerating. And he was just sort of sitting in his chair and sighing. And then he got the manual and was like, oh, okay, cool. So let's go do that. And it's like, that was kind of interesting. It's a bit different. Yeah, I don't know. He was fun. I liked him. So, all right. This week we're moving on to the 7th Doctor with Remembrance of the Daleks. This is season 25, serial 1. Yeah, I believe there are 26 seasons overall, and this is actually going to be our last serial to watch for a while because next week we're going to be watching the Doctor Who movie, and then we're actually going to take an even longer break than we normally do until about the middle of when I get to series 6 of normal Doctor Who. Then we're going to watch the Peter Cushing films. So
okay.
Yeah. Do you know anything about those?
No. I mean, I love Peter Cushing. Of course, having grown up in the 50s and 60s, got to watch all those, you know, cheesy old Hammer films.
Yeah.
Castle of Dracula, Frankenstein, all that sort of stuff. And Peter Cushing is just, you know, he was an amazing British actor. Really enjoyed all of his stuff. And I can see how he would be more in the lineage of the early Doctor Who's because you know, he's got a striking appearance and of course he's just a wonderfully quirky little actor. It would have been interesting. I know that, you know, it would have been somewhat heresy to have an American do it, but Peter Cushing, Christopher Lee, Vincent Price, all of those guys would have made excellent doctors because they just have that bizarre presence about them and can play both the seriousness, because, you know, they did all those horror films, but Vincent Price especially was just a comedic master, just did some wonderfully funny stuff.
That's interesting. Well, the two Cushing films that were released were actually remakes of First Doctor serials. So Peter Cushing is playing the First Doctor, and they're both Dalek movies. And, like, they recast everyone, Ian, Barbara, Susan, and I think actually Ian is played by, what's his name? Bernard Cribbins, I think, who I know from later in Doctor Who when he plays Donna Noble's grandfather. So that'll be at least cool. But, yeah, those apparently are interesting. And they were at the height of Dalek Mania in the 60s, so, yeah. But we'll get to that later. Right now, we're on to this Dalek episode, so, yeah, we'll see what this one's about. I wonder how many times they can bring back the Daleks, but they do.
Well, I mean, in science fiction, you have to have a good, almost unbeatable foe.
Yeah.
You know, when the Klingons kind of played out in the Star Trek series, they brought on the Borg.
Yeah.
You know, and just you have to have somebody that you can keep coming back to, because whenever you got nothing else, you know, whenever your scripts are really kind of, you know, where do we go from here?
Yeah.
Then, you know, always bring back the Daleks, because they're always good for a couple episodes while you're, you know, cranking out something new.
Right. So, yeah, we'll just be watching this episode. I feel like they're going to run out of titles, though. Remembrance of the Daleks. I don't know what they're remembering, but all right. So
I guess we'll find out.
Yeah. So let's just go ahead and get right into this episode. Here we go.
We all breathe the same Mayor. We all cherish our children's future.
John F. Kennedy.
Yeah. Not at all where I thought we were going.
Techno pop.
Yeah.
Interesting. It's more interesting than the last one, though.
Yeah.
That synthesized, bland version.
Yeah.
There's the rotating TARDIS, which they will now use forever and ever.
Yeah.
Boombox.
That does not look like someone the Doctor would hang out with.
Your clothing's a little anachronistic for this time period. Why don't you go and buy some consumables? There's a cafe down there, while I undertake a detailed and scientific examination of that van that has so singularly failed to grab your attention.
Right.
Ace,
What?
money.
Oh.
Odd that his coat doesn't actually fit him. It's a bit too large. Look at the shoulders and how they drape over. Now, 80s they had shoulder pads for men and women, but that's just wrong.
I find it interesting that he just hangs his umbrella on his pocket. I mean, I also find it interesting that he has a punk rock 80s companion that calls him Professor.
4 bacon sandwiches and a cup of coffee, please.
4 bacon sandwiches, 1 cup of coffee. Right, yeah?
November 63?
Oh, yeah. When was Kennedy killed?
63.
In November?
Yeah.
Huh.
See, they were playing the Kennedy speech,
Yeah.
and Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream, that was all 63, so...
Right.
And that was a Beatles song from the early 60s.
Whatever fired that weapon's trapped in there. There's no way out.
How can you be sure?
I've been here before.
Notice where you 5 or 10 minutes into this episode, it's all outdoors.
Yeah.
But again, production values have certainly stepped up from the cheesy interior exteriors of those first couple of Doctors.
And I think I noticed, like, half of the doors are men. I'm wondering if you close it, it says Foreman, as in this is his junkyard from the first serial.
Remember, he's armed and hostile, so keep under cover as much as possible. Sergeant, sir, detail some men to clear these civilians.
I mean, he has to be careful. He might run into himself.
Come down with me and we'll sort this lot out.
And I am Foreman.
Yeah, this might be it.
To transmit focused energy at that level, it's incredible. It's beyond the realm of current technology.
If we can save the science lecture for a less precipitous moment, perhaps Doctor can tell me what is going on.
Six, 7, 8.
They use the metric system.
What do you think you're doing? Boarding your van.
I really like this one. He's a lot of fun.
Well, tight script.
Yeah.
Good characters.
Daleks.
Oh, Daleks, where are they from?
If you were to have just a quick look round. Thank you. My pleasure.
This is going to the school.
It would be interesting if that was the school where Ian and Barbara taught.
You can always judge a man by the quality of his enemies.
Wasn't that what Susan was studying?
Huh.
The French Revolution.
Yeah, maybe. It's been a while since that first episode.
Ooh. Levitating Daleks.
Nice. This one's a ride.
All right. Much better.
Now we're getting somewhere. They kind of look like the Daleks from the first Dalek serial, too.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
Well, obviously better script, much tighter.
Yeah.
I mean, literally nothing in that was extraneous, every bit. The characters are well delineated. That's one of the other problems that I've had with some of these other scripts is you have 2 or 3 people who look so much alike. It's hard in the first couple of minutes to keep them apart. But you got the army people, and you got the scientist people, and you got the doctor and his companion, and then you got the evil Daleks. The only mystery so far is who's the little girl with the blonde hair.
Yeah, and how does that tie into the Daleks?
Yeah. There's an early 60s film, if I recall correctly, called Village of the Damned. It's about some children with telekinesis powers, and I don't know, maybe that's an homage to that. I'm sure we'll find out in the next episode or soon after.
Maybe. I don't know, but yeah, definitely a whole lot better. So.
It would be fun to see at least some semblance of Ian and Barbara. Even if it's in the distance, and he can go, oh, I must make sure that they don't see me because they have seen me as somebody else.
Because at the same time, we specifically, it's obvious that has to be the same school, and that was his junkyard. And honestly, how long was he there? If this is this actually before they head off to Caveman Land, or is this afterwards, which is why they're not there?
It seems to me it has to be right at that time, perhaps right after they left to go see the cavemen, because then Susan would have left behind the book on the French Revolution in the science lab. There's no other reason for that book to be in the science lab.
That's true. Yeah, and also because, if this was before they left, the TARDIS would be there.
Yeah.
Because that's where he was hanging out. He wasn't doing anything with the TARDIS, so it should still be there. He'd probably hear this commotion, go outside, and then they'd have to figure out a way to put in William Hartnell into this, which... Wasn't he dead by this point?
By the 80s, yeah, I'm sure he didn't last through the 70s. He was... again, I realize he was only in his 50s when he did the show originally, but again, my understanding was his health wasn't really great, and he didn't last very much longer after the show.
Well, and that's why they recast him anyway.
Yeah.
Was because his health was failing, so they introduced this way of rejuvenation at first, and then they just were like, "Hey, let's just make that a thing." And now here we are. We're on the 7th guy. So, all right.
Well, I have to say I like Sylvester McCoy. He's much more in the same the same ancestry, the lineage, if you will, of the first 4 Doctors.
And this definitely feels like. It's like we took how great Genesis of the Daleks was, and we merged it with more of the comedy of Tomb of the Cybermen. Because I really like Tomb of the Cybermen. I thought it was really funny and, a lot of fun. And it's like we just took those two and we just put them together perfectly. So we have our serious Doctor and we have our bit of a goofy Doctor, both now in Sylvester McCoy. So, yeah.
I think it was in the 80s when we finally realized that scary movies didn't have to just be scary. That we had the Ghostbusters that came out during that time. There was a lot of humor in the Star Trek movies that were coming out.
Yeah.
If you remember Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home, a lot of humor in that. And I think, again, that's why the genre kind of revived itself. Because when it doesn't take itself so seriously, you're going to attract a wider audience. And you also get to tell some better stories that way.
Yeah, that's true. All
right, part 2.
Here we go.
I'm trying to think if your hat back there is kind of like what the Doctor wears. Your little straw fedora.
Someone joked that it looks exactly like what the 5th Doctor wears. And I thought, they said oh, it's nice that you have Peter Davison's hat in the background. It's like, yes, the hat I've had for a year now, because I've just sort of left that in the shot this whole time, and I just never do anything about it. It's like, I don't know. There was one time someone asked, "Do you ever wear those hats?" I was like, "No, they don't really fit me."
I was also thinking even the interiors, like when scientist, the lady scientist, went back, and was telling I'll sick the other girl on him. That didn't seem to be a set. That seemed like that they had filmed it inside of an actual building. So, again, the production values on this particular series are off the chart compared to everything else.
It does make me wonder, because, yes, the production values are incredible. They must have had a pretty high budget. It's like, so what canceled the show then?
Again, maybe by the 90s, Britain was having a whole lot of economic problems. There was just a whole bunch of things that were going on that might have caused just a general decline in television overall.
Maybe.
Yeah, I can't remember any specifics, but it just might have been that it wasn't so much that Doctor Who was played out, it's just that people stopped watching television.
Yeah.
So
maybe. Also, heard some thunder out there.
Oh yes, we're supposed to be getting a new line of thunderstorms through this afternoon.
I mean, this is what we get for filming these in April. So
yes, April in Oklahoma. It's wild weather time. We at my school we conducted our second severe weather drill last week, where we have to be able to get 1,200 students, faculty, and staff into a gigantic safe building part of our campus within 10 minutes. So that, because where I teach in Moore, Oklahoma, they have experienced 2 EF5 tornadoes, wind speeds over 200 miles an hour within the last 30 years. So it's a huge and realistic threat. So Alex even joked at one point, if it happens, we may at some point stop a recording of one of these things and have to go to our safe place here in our house.
Yeah. We'll pause. I'll just take the camera with me. It'll be funny.
All right.
It's the one thing I ever thought, I've thought if I ever moved out of the state, it's like, well, I would miss whatever winter we get, which is not much, but I would miss that. But it's like, I would not miss storm season. All right. Now that we've talked for 10 minutes, let's get on to part 2.
Smack him. Smack him with the bat.
Yeah.
Oh no. We can navigate stairs with doors.
Oh no, wood.
The mortal enemy of Daleks.
It's just like signs.
Now we have a white Dalek.
Either that or just a dusty Dalek.
We must repair the transmat.
Yes.
No, it's just a white Dalek. Alright.
What are you doing here?
I'll have to sign for them, sir.
See, it's just little bits like that.
Yeah. Makes me wonder what he signed, actually. Yeah. Did he sign the Doctor? Did he sign, John Smith?
The heavier the decision, the larger the waves, the more uncertain the consequences.
It's getting really existential all of a sudden.
Best thing is just to get on with it.
Gotta say, it's easier to follow than the Buddhist interpretation thing that we watched.
Still gonna be salty about that one.
Oh, I remember that. When I lived in Herringswell, they used to deliver milk to our house twice a week.
I believe this belongs to you.
Yes.
The door was open, so
It wasn't homogenized. The cream was at the top. You had to shake it up to get the cream and the milk together.
Has yet to arrive, and I'm afraid I can't just let you. Somebody's come to collect that big casket. Yes, the doctor. It's just one thing, Governor. I thought you said he was an old geezer with white hair.
Let's see what you can make of this.
All right, Governor. Oh, cheerio, Doctor. But Doctor, what about you?
we possess this hand of Omega, what then?
We shall be on the brink of great power.
Well, we missed something.
Renegade Daleks have defied the will of the Emperor Dalek. They must be located and destroyed. And you are an agent of the Renegade Daleks.
I want for Mr. Ratcliffe.
Ladies, Doctor?
I'll meet you outside.
Sorry, Ace. Work to be done. Back at 6. Have dinner ready.
Whoa.
So rad.
Smack him upside the head.
Yeah.
Professor, you can't leave me here.
Takes a moment to warm up, dear.
There it goes.
That's children's show, but I couldn't tell you. I recognize the music. That's 63.
Yeah.
The time is 5:15, and Saturday viewing continues with an adventure in the new science fiction series
Doctor Who.
So then it is after.
26 by
They've already left.
1. Any sign of a military build-up, and they may simply decide to sterilize the area.
And we have no defense.
Frightening, isn't it? And to find that there are others better versed at death than human beings.
I wonder if this is why they start UNIT. Because it's not too long after.
Yeah.
Hello? Anyone at home?
Surprised there's no mention of Kennedy.
Yeah. Jeez! Never seen someone fight a Dalek like that.
All right. Fun stuff.
Yeah. That... I see no one's ever fought a Dalek. They just sort of run away or the Doctor does some weird thing. Almost makes me wonder... Well, first off, what did he do to that bat in the floating talking casket? We don't know. But it's like... It almost makes me wonder if she could use it like a lightsaber and just start throwing it back at them. Maybe.
I thought she was going to, take off one of their heads or something.
Yeah. Ooh, that's an 80s gun right there.
Green goo.
This one's still active.
Weapons. All's useless in the end.
We seem to be systematically breaking all of Ace's stuff.
How about lunch?
And for another, do you think I'm enjoying having some space vagrant come along and tell me that the painstaking research I've devoted my life to has been superseded by a bunch of tin-plated pepper pots?
Steady on.
Steady on. You dragged me down from Cambridge. You caused a peacetime emergency.
Report! The transport
is
no longer operational.
A Dalek with a Death Star for a head.
It's a little silly. That looks like the Spaceballs version.
The Hand of Omega is a mythical name for Omega's remote stellar manipulator, a device used to customize stars with. And didn't we have trouble with the prototype?
We.
Well, they're not the greatest models in the world.
This way.
I swear that's a Vauxhall. We used to have one of those when we lived in England. They call the ugliest cars in the world.
Want the doctor found and brought back here.
Yes, sir. Okay, men, follow me.
You two follow me.
Interesting, they're showing that the two female scientists are showing signs of women's liberation. don't like to be talked down to by these idiot military men.
Yeah.
That was just starting in 63.
Yeah.
The Daleks' major drawback is the dependency on rationality and logic. The solution: get a human, preferably young, imaginative, plug the child into the system, and their ingenuity and creativity are slaved to the battle computer.
That's well-boggling.
Yeah, that makes sense. In later Doctor Who, they have, like, the Cult of Skaro, which is specifically made to imagine.
Why didn't you just run off with the Hand of Omega and give it to the other Daleks?
Well, with a bit of luck, the Imperial Daleks will wipe out the Renegade faction. Besides, I can't just roll up and give it to them. They get suspicious.
Suspicious of what? You still haven't told me what.
Shh.
So he specifically wants to give it to the Imperial Daleks, but not the Renegades. I wonder why there are Renegades.
Great special effects.
Yeah. Okay. And we still don't know why there are Renegade Daleks.
I'm sure that'll be explained.
Well, yeah.
The denouement.
Yeah, it's just... I don't know. It's just interesting that there are Renegade Daleks.
But the script, the production values, everything, the actors are just light years ahead of anything we have seen. Literally from the very beginning. I mean, even Tom Baker had a lot of good stuff in those episodes that we watched, but this is, again, this is just generations ahead in storytelling and casting and special effects and sets and the whole works.
Well, when you do it for 20 years, I guess at some point you perfect it.
Are you willing to cooperate with me now?
Do I have a choice?
Well, you could go down there and make a gloriously futile gesture, yes.
What do we do?
You know, it'd be funny if in
piracy.
the Hartnell era they go back to this school and it's just destroyed. And it's like, what happened there? It's like, you gotta wait 20 years to find out.
Ace.
This background music, again, very similar. A guy named Harold Faltermeyer did a similar score to Beverly Hills Cop during this time period.
Really doing a lot with the Daleks this time around. Also, I wonder, were the Renegades always black? Or did they get painted when they left?
Smoked them.
Yeah.
Now, once I'm down there, I'll attempt to open that hatch. Ace, you come after, then Gilmore followed by Allison and Rachel. Any questions? No?
Please tell me
Good.
he uses that umbrella.
Of course he will.
That's just stupid.
When he said he needed our help, I had hoped it meant more in the technical area.
It was a vain hope.
You brought it,
Renegade Daleks are blobs.
Blobs?
Imperial Daleks are bionic blobs with bits added. Well, you can tell that Daleks are into racial purity. So one lot of Daleks reckon that the other lot of blobs are too different.
So the Renegades are the originals then, I guess?
You have confounded me for the last time!
Damn, Ross. I should have known. I see you've discarded the last vestige of your human form. Every time our paths have crossed, I have defeated you.
How is he the Emperor, though? They killed him.
Planet Skaro about to vaporize! You have tricked me!
tricked yourself.
Omega device returning! 15!
Bye, Davros. It hasn't been pleasant.
Yeesh.
Emperor abandoning bridge! 8! Emperor activating escape pod!
Broke the whole staircase. So now we still gotta deal with these guys.
Ashes to ashes. Dust to dust.
Alright then.
Doctor,
Yes,
we did good, didn't we?
perhaps. Time will tell. Always does.
Okay then.
Well done.
Yeah. That was definitely good. Yeah, that was really good. It was really, really good.
Very tight story.
Yeah.
Lots of twists and turns.
Yeah. And that's crazy that he destroyed Skaro. Probably didn't even need to do that. He just like, well, I did, and I killed all the Imperial Daleks, but
also, I mean, subtle as it was, keeping with, his prime directive, if you want to call it, he didn't destroy Skaros.
That's true.
Davros did.
Yeah.
Because he told him, don't do that, and he did it anyway, and that ended up causing his own destruction.
Yeah.
But got away.
Yeah.
They did launch. Now, that's assuming, and of course we know it will, that the escape pod got out of the destruction of the mothership.
Yeah. So he did get away, and from what I've seen, because he does come back in New Doctor Who at the end of Series 4, and he faces off against Tennant, and Tennant says, like, I watched you die, which is like the 8th time, but he said, the last time I saw you, you died in the first year of the Time War. So I assume that that's when he would come back. Obviously, we don't have anything on the Time War. That happened between the 8th Doctor's movie and the beginning of the 9th Doctor's era. So that's all stuff we saw that we didn't see. It was all off screen. But it's interesting. I'm wondering if this is the last appearance of the Daleks in classic continuity. It might be, because, I mean, after this, there's only one season, so it could have been it. So that is interesting. And I kind of thought, too, that, it's like we destroyed all the Imperial Daleks, these, white Daleks that we've never seen before. But the older Daleks, the Renegade Daleks, like, well, I kind of figured they would just stay behind, and that's how, we lead into they'll come back sometime. And it's like, well, not exactly. So it's like they were all killed. The Imperial Daleks were killed. Skaro was destroyed. So it's interesting that we're just kind of stuck. Like, the Daleks right now is just Davros. And in continuity, in the explanation of what happens between the 8th and the 9th Doctor, you sort of have to think that just from Davros, he went through and recreated the entire Dalek race to be big enough to be in a time war. So, with all the Time Lords too. So
now there was one loose end that I don't remember seeing being tied up. When Mike escapes from the girl and Ratcliffe dies, he's still got the little time bubble, whatever that thing was.
Yeah.
And when he came out after she had gone, he still had it. Next time we see him, he's at home, but it's not there. The Doctor doesn't mention taking it back, so is that,
Well, I did see in the background when the girl was attacking Ace. I did see it there.
Oh, okay.
It was in the house, so he still had it. But that doesn't help. They don't say anything about it. It's not destroyed, and as far as we know, the Doctor doesn't take it unless, before, while everyone's busy at the funeral. Whose funeral was that?
Mike's.
I guess Mike's.
Yeah.
I don't know, giving a funeral to a traitor, I suppose.
Yes, but I mean, it turns out, he was duped. He thought he was doing the right thing, and it turns out that he wasn't.
I guess. I'll give you that one. But, so I guess maybe you could say, well, while everyone was distracted at the funeral, the Doctor went in, grabbed the thing, and then put it on the TARDIS. So, yeah. Alright. Well, we can go over the notes here. I wrote down, first off, we can talk about McCoy's performance, because it is pretty solid. We've said, we didn't care for what we saw of Peter Davison because he was just, sort of in the background, didn't really do anything. And while I did I liked Colin Baker's performance, I thought he was a bit more like the Doctor. It's this seemed like the prime of the Doctor. He's incredibly energetic, fast-paced. He's spewing out 20 different, technobabble things. And he's going through and he's basically saving the day on his own, to where he really didn't need the military. He was distracting them, keeping them distracted while he did, Dalek hunting. And even when he had the two scientists there, he didn't really need them to help out. So this was a really, really hands-on Doctor.
Yeah.
But again, is that, I would assume that's what the Seventh Doctor is like, but this is a Dalek story, and with any Dalek story, that has to happen. The Doctor has to be the one taking charge against the Daleks. And that's what we kind of said, yes, Davison or Colin Baker, it's they're not doing as much as McCoy did, but I wonder what they would be like in a Dalek episode, because we saw that with Hartnell in that first Doctor Dalek episode, or with Tom Baker, he had that episode. And to an extent, you could kind of say the same thing about Tomb of the Cybermen, because the Cybermen they're not quite to the level of the Daleks, I don't think, but they are a pretty big enemy, and Troughton really had to, get hands-on and really go in and defeat them. And honestly, it's the same thing with the other one that we watched, with John Pertwee, because that was the Master. So that's another situation where you really have to, the Doctor has to take large action. And so, yeah, it's maybe it's just that those last two episodes we saw, it's these aren't the big threats that we have been watching with Classic Who. Not that they go against large threats all the time, but from the 4 Doctors that we watched first and now to McCoy, we're watching these very large threats that the Doctor just has to deal with. So maybe that made it a little bit better. So, and then I like that we do have callbacks to the first Doctor and to the first serials, which is strange. Why did they specifically choose November of 1963 to put this in? I feel like you could almost have easily have put this in the 80s and it still would have worked just fine. So, yeah, I'm not exactly sure why they did that. And honestly, because they don't even play that up really much. It's okay, well, yes, the Doctor has been to this junkyard before, because this was his junkyard that he sort of hung out in. And, that's the school where Ian and Barbara used to work. And it's and that's that.
I had just a fleeting thought that maybe they had chosen that because, that's the time marker. That's the first time that we see, Hartnell, whether he's the first Doctor or, he was a regeneration of a previous Doctor. But they've come back to that point as if to say, this is where it started, and so we have to somehow figure out how to change the timeline, only they arrive too late because Hartnell and Ian and Barbara and Susan have already gone. Yeah. Evidenced by the French Revolution book left there in the science lab.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It just, it's one of those things where it maybe it's just, their time machine brought them to that spot because that's where we started to see the Doctor not interfering in world matter or in Earth matters, but just it's kind of like a homing signal.
Yeah. Well, and I just remembered, because this is season 25 of the show, and this is the first episode of the season. So maybe that's part of the reason like they chose to put it in this time, was because like, hey, this is our 25th season. It's a pretty big deal. So maybe we need to do something to sort of celebrate that, which is why, beginning of the season is also a Dalek episode. And, at the end they throw in that the Emperor of the Daleks is Davros. It's like we're just trying to bring in we're trying to bring in the callbacks and also tell a really solid Dr. Dalek story.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. I wrote down the old Daleks. So the Renegade Daleks did seem to be a little bit more in line with the designs of the original Daleks we saw in back in the first Doctor's era. But that's kind of just I don't know if that was specifically designed that way, or if like maybe the Daleks didn't really get updated that much, because they just seem like normal Daleks. Like they had their leader who was completely in black, and then the others were sort of gray, and then they're supposed to be the Renegade faction. Again, it's like why are they? Because that seems to be the normal Dalek color, at least in these classic episodes. So why is it that they are different colors? Was it, obviously it's just to tell them apart easier. Yeah. It's like, okay, the gray ones, the darker ones are the Renegades, and the white ones are the Imperials. But it's just an interesting design choice.
Well, again, that may be either a subtle or not so subtle reference to that slightly underlying theme of that late 80s when Ace is there in the boarding house and she sees the sign in the window and it says no coloreds.
Wow.
And, I don't want to say that, there's specifically a segregation of the two Dalek, but again, I think it all goes back to the not we, one group is us and everybody else is them. And if you're not us, then we have to exterminate you.
Which, that was the whole point. That's why they said there were Renegade Daleks, because they seem to be... Like, they kind of said the Imperials were different. When they blasted open a Renegade, it's like, okay, well, that's just the normal squid dude in there. And then they blasted open an Imperial, and a claw came out. And the Doctor realized that shouldn't be there. That's different. Why is that different? And that's the reason that there are Renegade Daleks, is because they see themselves as, I guess, more pure Daleks, whereas the other ones, like, well, they're adding stuff to them, and they're more crab now than Dalek.
More crab than squid.
Yeah, it's
suddenly I'm hungry for seafood.
Yeah. Well, when they were in that restaurant, I was like, man, I could go for a burger. That sounds nice.
And that's another little loose end. The Doctor goes to the cafe. Obviously, he's been there before. He knows about Harry. He knows that his wife's having twins. And yet, there was never an interaction between the Doctor and Harry. Yeah. Doctor and the guy who is there at the counter late at night, and Ace and Harry. But the Doctor never... And because I would have liked to have had Harry look at him and go, you remind me of somebody, but I can't say who. It's because he obviously looks different than Hartnell. But it would have been nice just to have just a moment where he goes, wow, you certainly remind me of someone, but you don't look anything like him. So,
yeah. Now, maybe I'm just misremembering. Who would Harry have been?
I don't think we ever saw Harry.
Okay, because I'm thinking like this can't be the same Harry that was with the fourth Doctor, unless he was picked up from even further back than this, or maybe it's sort of like this is Harry's father or something. It's like I am trying to wonder I'm trying to figure out the tie-ins. Like, how does the Doctor know Harry? Where has he been? Is it just that, when the Doctor needed something different than those cubes that he created on the TARDIS, like, well, I'll go out and get some chips, and then that's how he knows. And it's like, well, he's coming back there, and it's like, well, I know everything that's going to happen because that happened to me so long ago.
Yeah. So it was fun. I liked seeing all the little Easter eggs in there.
Yeah, which that was a long time ago for him, because he said that he's had about 900 years of experience in doing stuff, and so he says that, but I believe the first Doctor is supposed to be around maybe 450 years old, so it has been about 500 years for him, give or take, which is interesting. I'm wondering if there are moments like between a season or between companions where it's like, well, he lost his companion this episode, next episode he goes and gets a new companion. It's like, how much time has passed for him? Has it been 100 years or something? Because it has to. Over the course of 25 seasons, he's aged almost 500 years. So that's interesting. I wrote down the casket, or the Hand of Omega, which it drove me crazy trying to figure out what they were saying. Omega, and it's like, what? And it's like, oh, Omega. They're saying it just weird. So that was interesting, having a bit of lore about like how the Time Lords came to be. Like, this is the thing that gave the Time Lords their power to really travel through time successfully. Because he even said, it's like, yes, the Daleks can travel through time with that, little bubble thing, but it's a very crude, very bad way of time travel.
Yeah.
So that was interesting. It did sort of, it took a minute to really get an explanation of it, because otherwise he just sort of showed up to this casket and then just he fixed up the bat, and then he took it, started floating away and following him, and then he just buried it. And it's like, okay, that's interesting. And they said, like, oh yeah, the Doctor's here. It's like, I thought you said he was some old geezer with white hair. This doesn't look like him. But so maybe that showed up in a Hartnell episode or something, or that Hartnell was keeping it there and keeping an eye on it, but then he ends up, accidentally going back in time and he can't get back. So now, the Doctor finally remembers that. It's like, oh yeah. So he goes and, first makes sure it's still there, and then he realizes that's what the Daleks are after.
Minor point, the tombstone, the black granite or black marble tombstone that stuck out like a sore thumb in the middle of all those medieval and 17th and 18th and 19th century headstones. That didn't seem like something that the Doctor would do. It seems to me that because that stands out, even if that was a stylized W, which we don't really know, or if that was some other kind of symbol from Gallifrey or anything, but if you want to say, hey, bad guys, here's something that take a look at. So it just seems to me that he would have tried to disguise it a little bit more than that. But a minor point.
Maybe, but he knew that the Daleks were after it, so he wanted them to get it, because he was going to go through this whole thing and end up destroying Skaro and stuff. So he did want them to get it, but at the same time, it's like, well, then you think like, okay, when he's talking to the blind priest, it's like, well, the spot's been ready for a month, and it's like, okay, so this is something that the first Doctor was getting ready to do. Like, I assume again he was getting ready to do it, and then he ended up traveling back in time. So he was going to do it, so he chose that very obvious looking, like, this stands out tombstone. Yeah. So
because McCoy did say, I want them to have it, but I don't want to make it too obvious; they'll get suspicious. So that kind of bothered me.
But I guess
again, didn't distract from the whole story. Just an excellent story, excellent 4 episodes.
Let's see. We talked about the Renegades. The bat was interesting. First off, the design of Ace was the most 80s thing I've seen. And just the fact that she had a bat, the fact that she had a giant boombox, both of which got destroyed, which is interesting. And then just the fact that he used the Hand of Omega to power up the bat, and then she used that in a fight scene with the Daleks, which again, I've just never really seen that. The closest maybe, like, there was an episode of New Doctor Who where the Cybermen actually fought the Daleks, but it was a very one-sided fight. The Cybermen weren't up to snuff to face the Daleks. And then this just kind of goes all out, her taking on, beating them down, knocking off their, eye stalks, and then jumping through the window and stuff like that. It's like, that's just sort of went for it. It's like, have we ever done a fight scene with the Daleks? No. Can we do that? Yeah, we have the budget. Sure. I mean, we said the budget went up. Yeah. The budget just kept going up in this. So, I mean, you might as well, if the budget's that high. It kind of makes me wonder, like, when the shuttle landed, like, I was trying to think, like, okay, I would assume that's a model that's like, this is all, the model of the school, and they drop that down as a model, and it's like, but then it cuts and it's actually there in the place, and they walk out of it and stuff like that, and it's like, I mean, I don't know, because it looked very real. Like, it didn't look like the CG, which that was the thing with the casket. It was like, well, it's cool that they have this floating casket. It looked like a fake floating casket.
Yeah.
Like, the CG was not up to it for that part, but it looked like the shuttle actually was there and landed. So it's like, okay, so maybe it was a miniature that they put down, and then they cut to the real thing, and they cut back, and then they did the miniature. It would make sense that would be the case, but I also kind of wonder, it's like, well, now I'm curious if they actually, it's like, no, they couldn't have actually dropped the thing.
Yeah, they could have mocked it up in plywood, so it wouldn't have been that heavy, and then lowered it down with a crane, and then just CGI'd the crane out. But yeah, I was thinking that too, that it looked like an actual shuttlecraft landing in the courtyard of the school. I thought that was very well done. Now, the stuff in space obviously looked hokey, and again, the floating casket. But the other special effects were very, very good.
Yeah. So, all right. I wrote down the Emperor and the White Daleks, the Imperial Daleks. So, it makes me wonder, is like, how many did each faction have? Because, we have the Renegade Daleks, like, is that a minority? Is that half the population? And then we have the Imperial Daleks, like, well, they seem to have a lot more of their stuff together. Like, they have the ships and stuff like that. The Renegades seem to just use that, time sphere in order to travel around. So it's like, yeah, how much technology do the Imperials have? And it's like, well, maybe they have more technology. Maybe they are more advanced because they are, genetically modified Daleks. So
GMO Daleks. The mind boggles.
Yeah. I wrote down the girl and the imagination. It took a while to really get an explanation on that girl, because otherwise it's like, it's just a girl that just keeps going around, and it's like, okay, I do understand now that she was used for her imagination, because the Daleks don't do that, which is interesting. And I think it's kind of interesting that the Renegade Daleks who were using her for imagination, which is, so that does sort of go against the normal Dalek way. So they're both kind of doing that. The Imperials are, modifying themselves, whereas the Renegade Daleks, well, they're using imagination and stuff like that. So neither of them are really pure Daleks when you get down to it. Yeah. Although you could say it's like, well, they are still pure Daleks. It's just that they're using something else they're basically using the girl and her imagination as a weapon instead of, it's like, well, it's not them.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing about that is that because it's the Renegades that are using this girl's imagination, and they're completely black. And that's interesting because in New Doctor Who, we get the Cult of Skaro, these 4 Daleks that were specifically designed to imagine, to be creative, because the Daleks were getting desperate on trying to win. So they created this Cult of Skaro to imagine, to try to think of new ways in order to defeat their enemies, things that a normal Dalek would never think of, because that's just not who they are. So I find that interesting, because the leader of those Daleks, Dalek Sec, was completely black. He was a black Dalek, and the others were the normal sort of gold Daleks, but he, as the leader, was completely black. And that was another part of, the way they were different from other Daleks was that they had names. Their leader was Dalek Sec, who eventually used his imagination even further and became, he actually merged with a human to become a human Dalek hybrid in order to, try to be even better. And then the other Daleks turned on him like, okay, you're going a little too far on that. So
there is now again, I may be stretching this way too far, but you did have Ratcliffe make the one reference to the Nazis. About we took the wrong side in the last war.
Yeah.
And again, what you've just said there kind of brings me back around to, of course, what a lot of people thought was the biggest problem with the ideology of the Third Reich is that they were thinking of, we're going to have this race of tall, blonde-haired, blue-eyed Supermen, the Ubermensch, and yet they were being led by a short little ugly guy with black hair, and so I don't know if that was a just even a vague kind of reference to Hitler trying to create an imperfect man trying to create the perfect race, but it did seem that there was just a tiny little bit of an echo there.
Yeah, maybe. So I don't know. That was interesting. It was such a tiny reference to that too. It's like, well, in the last war, we took the wrong side. It's like, okay. I was gonna say it's like, well, this is the 80s. Like, well, no. This is the 60s. So this is only 20 years later for him.
The first time he said that, I actually had a flashback to the Falklands War, and I don't know if you ever learned about the Falklands War.
No.
In the early 1980s. You want to talk about the dumbest thing that has ever happened? Off the east coast of Argentina, this is just like a couple of 100 miles north of the Antarctic Circle, there are a group of islands called the Falklands.
Okay.
The British took them from Spain like in the 1800s sometime, and it was used basically as a kind of a refueling station, a stopover for the British on their way to the Pacific before the Panama Canal was opened. In the 1980s, you had this strongman come to power in Argentina, and trying to show off what a macho guy he was and how Argentina was going to be on the world stage. He had his soldiers invade the Falkland Islands and take them over and claim that since the British stole them 200 years ago, the Argentinians had the right to take them back, called them Las Malvinas. And the British said, oh no, we're going to take back the Falklands. Literally sailed the entire British fleet halfway down the world, and they had like a 2-week war between Great Britain and Argentina over a collection of rocks that were just totally worthless. There were probably more sheep on the Falklands than there were people. Yeah. But it resulted in a huge loss of life. The Argentinians actually sank one of the British ships with a new kind of missile that obviously ships are not designed to protect against. And the British then bombed the hell out of the Argentinians, and finally the Argentinians surrendered. But today, this is 30, almost 40 years later, Argentina and Great Britain are still at odds over these tiny little specks of dirt down in the South Pacific, or the South Atlantic, sorry. So,
but they don't need them.
No, but it's all about pride. It's all about Argentina must prove that it is still. Anyway, I don't know. So, right. Look that up sometime. The Falkland Islands War.
All right, that's something.
Yeah, and again, I have no idea if any of this was part of that, because if this was 1988, if you're saying the 25th season, about 88.
Yeah.
The Falkland Islands War was, I want to say, 81, 82, 83, somewhere in there. So it would have still been on people's minds. So, anyway.
Yes.
Forget all about that.
All right. Let's see. I wrote down the scientists, the 2 scientists that were there that just weren't allowed to do anything,
but they were allowed to comment about the fact that that was the nice thing.
They let everyone know that they weren't doing anything.
Yeah, and I thought, if the story had turned out differently, if Ace and Mike had developed a relationship, that if she stayed behind, even though she was 20 years too soon, then what a great set of companions to have the 2 scientists come along, because they knew what they needed to know, and they weren't timid about saying what needed to be said.
Yeah, they definitely would have worked. They would have worked against the Doctor. Like, they would have worked well off of him. But at the same time, I do think it's like, yeah, but every comment they made, he did sort of just ignore, and he went on and did his stuff. So, yeah, they would have been interesting companions, and, maybe a bit, more useful. We had that whole thing. It's like, well, what are the companions used for? And it's like, and people did say it's like the Doctor doesn't actually choose his companions based on how useful they are, just if he likes them.
Yeah.
So,
and I do have to say this about Ace. It's nice to see a woman being used as the muscle.
Yeah.
When you've had Jamie and you've had all these other guys in the past, and then here comes a girl with a bat, and oddly enough, a baseball bat and not a cricket bat. And again, she didn't sound American at all, so makes you wonder why she had a baseball bat. But anyway, to see her busting heads, that was admirable. Way to go.
Yeah, because we had like Susan and Barbara, and they got captured. Sometimes Barbara was a bit more useful than Susan, honestly, but that's not much. And it's like, yeah, when you really think about it, it's like, and we don't often have. Like, it's not that, all the male companions were muscles. It's like, okay, well, we had Jamie. And it's like, okay, anyone else? And it's like, well, Ian, sort of, just because, back then it was more written that he was the leading man instead of the Doctor. And it's like, then you go on and it's like, okay, third Doctor, well, we had the Brigadier. And it's like, okay, he was kind of there. He didn't do much. And then fourth Doctor, we had Harry. I don't remember Harry doing that much in that one, honestly. And it's like, okay, well, Sarah Jane's definitely not the muscle. We move on to Davison's, like, Tegan gets knocked out for most of the episode. Nyssa is knocked out the entire episode. And Adric's just sort of doing his thing. And then even last episode that we had, it's like we had Perry, and she was there, kind of helped. Again, still not a muscle, but it was like the one time where we just had one companion. And then, now it is a bit of a striking difference. Like, Ace does go around knocking heads if she has to.
Yeah.
Honestly, it would have been interesting if she had fought Mike, because honestly, I feel like she could have probably taken him.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And then I guess sort of the last thing I wrote down was Davros. Now, I had heard that Davros was going to be in this episode, and before they turned around the one, Dalek sort of thing and revealed that was the little girl, I thought that was Davros. Everyone keeps complaining about how I say Davros.
We're Americans, sorry.
Yeah, it happens. Well, and I still say it because it's spelled like Davos, that it should, whatever. So I thought that was Davros from the beginning, and then they turned it around and it's like, that doesn't look like Davros, and took off the helmet. I was like, oh, that's how we're tying in the little girl. Because I was like, okay, well, that's good. And I was like, maybe this is sort of like last episode, because last episode I said like, oh, I thought the Master was going to be in this, and he wasn't. And it's like, oh, maybe I misheard that. Maybe it's some other, because there's so many different titles. I saw something of the Daleks, and I was like, okay, if Davros is in that, I figured it was Remembrance. And then to just have him show up at the last second, or kind of show up at the last second, with the twist being that he's the Emperor of the Daleks. But why is he the Emperor of the Daleks, is my question, because, we have these Imperial Daleks that are genetically modifying themselves, and it's like, okay, that does make sense that they would have Davros do that, because he's a scientist, he created them, so he's modifying them. But why would they then make him the Emperor? Because that was the whole thing in Genesis, was that they realized they didn't need him, and they ended up killing him, and obviously he comes back 20 million times. And it was the same thing when they brought him back in New Doctor Who. Tennant realizes, that they have the Supreme Dalek there, and he's like, take the Doctor to the vault. And Tennant realizes, oh, he said take us here to the vault where you are, Davros. Like, you're not in control of them. anymore. You know, what are you? Are you a prisoner? Are you a slave or something? And Davros just says, like, we have an arrangement. And it's like, you can clearly see that he is mad that he has no control over them anymore.
Yeah.
So it is fascinating that he is the emperor of them. But at the same time, with that giant dark helmet dome they put over him, it's like, I guess he's a bit more Dalek now, but then he reveals it, and it's like, well, it's still him in there, and it's like...
But he had wires all over him, and...
Yeah, it's like, you know, the Doctor even said, I think, like, you know, you took away pretty much everything biological about you, and it's like, well, he's still got a head, and it's like, but I guess that's it. That's the last thing that he has, is his head. So, that's interesting that he would be the Emperor of the Daleks, despite the fact that multiple times they get rid of him because they don't need him anymore. Because it's like, well, you know, we were built to say the Daleks are the superior race, so we don't need any remaining Khaleds anymore, and that's what Davros is he is a Khaled. So that's interesting. And then just having him basically, he blew it and not only destroyed Skaro, but then also destroyed himself.
Yeah.
Well, he destroyed the rest of the ship, and then he escaped at the last second. So yeah, that was also interesting. And I guess I was kind of thinking, like, you know, that's kind of risky, isn't it, to, you know, destroy Skaro like this? And it's like, but I bet, you know, once you get to season 25 and you need to do something different with the Daleks, like, if they were to bring the Daleks back, whether it's, you know, in the final season or if they did continue into other seasons, like, well, if we bring the Daleks back, then, you know, we get to do new things. Like, how do they survive without Skaro? Which, that's also the new thing. That seems to be the thing in New Doctor Who. It's like, if you just let one Dalek go, they will come back with armies. So, and that's the thing. It's like, there was one that got away and went back in time and actually saved Davros. And then from him, they created an entire army of Daleks. So it's like, so yeah, that...
They're like cockroaches.
Basically, they just won't go away.
Now, there's a series for you, Cockroaches of Time.
Yeah. Well, that's basically all I wrote down. And so, yeah, great episode. Makes me want to watch more of the 7th Doctor.
Yeah.
He seems like a lot of fun.
Yes.
So, yeah, you got anything else to say?
I'm done.
All right. Well, then, that's 3 episodes down. We have 1 more to go, though. So, next week we will be watching the Doctor Who movie with the 8th Doctor. What do you think that's going to be like?
I have no idea.
Yeah. Apparently it was like co-made by Americans. Like, because they were trying to revive Doctor Who, possibly on American networks. I think like by Fox or something. So yeah, it'll be interesting. So, yeah. Okay. And it's the one and only time we ever see the 8th Doctor. Otherwise, I know the actor does come back for, like, a ton of audio dramas and stuff like that. So, that's good. But this is the only time that he's on screen. So, yeah. That is pretty much that. We will see you guys next week for the movie. With that all being said, we're Alex and Dad from 7th Hour Films, and we will see you guys next time. Take care. Alright guys, thanks for watching this video. If you want to watch more of our Doctor Who classic reactions, you can click on the playlist, you can subscribe if you haven't done that already, and be sure you hit that notification bell. You can support me on Patreon and follow me on social media, links below in the description. See you guys later.